Happy to be back in another episode of Environmental Digest, and today we are going to talk about something that's absolutely fundamental to global sustainability and really the planet's future. Household energy consumption, or HEC.
Yeah, it's so critical. When we talk about climate action, I think our minds often go straight to, heavy industry or power plants. But it's huge.
How huge?
The household sector accounts for almost 1/3 of the entire global primary energy demand. I mean, that is just a colossal footprint.
A third.
A third. So if we can't understand and influence how you, the listener, use energy at home, we're really missing one of the biggest pieces of the puzzle.
Absolutely. And the research community, they definitely know this. The urgency is, well, you can see it in the sheer volume of academic work coming out.
Right.
So our mission for you today is to basically shortcut decades of reading. We're doing a deep dive into a huge meta-analysis. It's a systematic bibliometric review of, get this, 1,134 publications on HEC, and it spans 35 years. From 1983 all the way to 2018, we're going to map out the academic landscape, find the key players, and uncover what the hottest research frontiers are right now.
And when you look at those trends, the publication trends, the growth isn't just steady. It's not linear at all. It's exponential.
It really is.
If you were a scholar in this field, I mean, you'd have to be running just to keep up. 2005 seems to have been a major turning point, but the acceleration since then is just staggering.
Here's the one data point that really jumped out at me right away. The number of articles published in just the 3 most recent years they looked at, so 2016 to 2018, that number is nearly equal to the entire previous decade.
The entire decade, from 2006 to 2015.
Exactly. That kind of explosive geometric expansion. I mean, that tells you this is a field under immense pressure and probably getting a lot of funding.
Oh, for sure. And that pressure, it really stems from these evolving global priorities. If you trace the history, the roots of it, HEC research was sort of born in the 1970s.
Right, the oil crisis era.
Exactly. It was all about fossil fuel depletion. A very technical problem back then, How do we build better insulation? More efficient furnaces?
So really just an engineering and economics problem at the start.
Precisely. But by the 1990s, the focus, it just broadened significantly. Public awareness of climate change and, the need for environmental protection really pushed the research out of that purely technical box.
Okay, so it wasn't just about efficiency anymore.
No, suddenly the question wasn't just how much energy people use, but what impact that has on the atmosphere. And that, of course, pulled in the environmental sciences.
Okay, so let's unpack where all this knowledge is being collected. I mean, if you wanted to dive into HEC research today, where would you even start?
Well, you'd find yourself spending about half your time in just 3 journals.
Only 3?
Yeah. Energy policy, energy, and energy economics. Nearly half of all the studies they reviewed were published right there.
That is an incredible concentration.
It is. And that extreme centralization tells us something really crucial about the field's structure. These journals are the established gatekeepers.
They set the agenda.
They absolutely do. They define the accepted methods, the big research questions. So if you want to influence the field, you pretty much have to publish there.
And those journals, they really represent the core disciplines, right? Environmental sciences and ecology, energy and fuels, and business and economics. Those are the pillars.
They are, but as the field expands, new areas are joining the conversation, which is where it gets interesting.
Okay, what are we seeing now?
Well, if you look at the top 10 most productive fields, transportation and meteorology and atmospheric science have recently pushed their way in.
Transportation, that feels, I don't know, incredibly specific compared to a whole field like economics. What does that suggest?
It suggests the research is being driven by these big systemic global issues now. The inclusion of transportation, that reflects the rising focus on green travel, on electric vehicles.
Which connects directly to household charging and energy demand.
Exactly. And the appearance of atmospheric science shows that researchers are now linking individual household choices directly to measurable climate impacts. It's not just about your energy bill anymore. It's about your direct contribution to the atmosphere.
So let's shift from the intellectual map to the physical one. Who is actually writing all this stuff? Where are they?
Right, the global players and their networks.
While the work is spread out, the bulk of it, over 38%, is super concentrated in just 3 academic powerhouses, the USA, China, and the UK.
And overall, it's still developed countries, particularly in Europe, that dominate the field.
But those three aren't just publishing a lot. I mean, they're setting the research agenda for everyone else.
They really are. And what's fascinating is the dynamic of international collaboration. Overall, it's surprisingly low. A lot of papers are just single-country productions.
But not between the U.S. and China.
Right. The USA and China show the strongest connection, the highest frequency of cooperation. They act as this crucial bridge in the global network.
That is a powerful nexus. And the study says China actually has the highest degree of international cooperation overall. Something like a third of its papers are multi-country.
Yeah, 33%. And China partners a lot with Australia and Japan, so there are these strong regional ties.
Meanwhile, the U.S. is clustering more with its traditional European partners, Germany, the U.K., Switzerland.
So you have these two massive academic hubs, the US and China, but they're also these essential nodes connecting two different research ecosystems. It's fascinating.
Now let's shift to the organizational context, because
Yeah.
this is where a really fundamental challenge for real-world impact comes up.
Oh, absolutely. The field is overwhelmingly academic. I mean, universities account for a staggering 89% of all the contributing organizations.
89%.
Yeah.
And here's the number that should really make everyone stop and think. The involvement of government entities and the private sector is less than 1% each.
Less than 1%. The people who actually design energy policy, who build the smart grids, who sell the insulation, their voice is almost completely absent from the research.
So what does that mean? It raises a huge concern, right? If the research is dominated by academics asking these, theoretical questions.
How can we expect the policymakers and the industry practitioners to be fully informed? Their real-world constraints, their implementation challenges, they're just not part of the conversation when the research is being generated.
It's like this academic insulation, if you will.
That's a great way to put it. It's a massive gap in the literature. And you have to wonder if we're developing these brilliant solutions that just aren't pragmatic or scalable because the people holding the purse strings aren't in the room from the start.
Exactly. And that academic focus is what sort of forced the major shift in the core themes that we see later on.
Yeah, the research had to evolve. It went from just measuring kilowatt hours to trying to measure human psychology.
Because the old models, the purely economic ones, just weren't working.
Not fully. The big shift really happened after 2002. That was after Daniel Kahneman won the Nobel Prize for his work in behavioral economics. That's when behavioral analysis was formally brought into energy conservation research. Scholars finally realized that technology alone wasn't closing this crucial divide.
And that divide is what the literature calls the energy efficiency gap.
Correct. The energy efficiency gap. It's the difference between the optimal, theoretically best energy use for a home and what people actually use in the real world.
And that gap just persists, even with economic incentives.
It does, and it forced researchers to look past the tech and start integrating variables like, cultural norms, social cues, habits, all these other irrational factors.
So if we look at the keywords authors are using, that should confirm this shift.
The trends are sharp. The single most frequently used keyword is still energy efficiency, and its use is actually increasing over time.
Okay.
This research is often about benchmarking building performance and, maybe most importantly, quantifying the rebound effect.
The rebound effect. That's the classic theme where, efficiency gains are offset because people just end up using more energy.
Exactly. You buy more efficient cars so you feel less guilty and just drive more. The intended savings, they bounce back either partially or sometimes completely because our behavior changes.
But there's a more humanitarian side to the keyword trends too, isn't there?
A huge one. The second most popular keyword in recent years is energy poverty. That's a term you almost never saw before 2006.
And that reflects a massive, and I'd say very necessary, shift toward equity.
It does. Energy poverty research addresses inequity, human well-being, and health risks, especially in developing economies or low-income households everywhere.
So things like exposure to biomass smoke indoors.
Right, or the challenges of retrofitting homes to be more equitable, the policies needed to ensure everyone has access to affordable, clean energy. It directly aligns the academic community with the UN's Sustainable Development Goals.
Specifically SDG 7, affordable and clean energy.
Exactly. And meanwhile, keywords like climate change and electricity consumption are stable or growing. It confirms that the research focus is shifting globally toward electricity and away from other fuel types.
So who are the thought leaders, the people actually driving this change? The study identifies them by looking at high citations.
Right. Authors with over 100 citations and a high hate index. The absolute heavyweight in terms of sheer citations is Linda Stagg. over 2,600 citations.
And her focus is primarily on energy use behavior.
It is. But the network analysis is where you find the deeper insight. While Steg has the most citations, her co-citation strength, so how often she's cited with other core HEC scholars, is actually relatively low.
Why does that matter? What does that tell us?
It suggests that her field, behavioral research, is still a relatively new and somewhat specialized area within the broader HEC field. She's a pioneer, but her work isn't yet deeply integrated across all three of those established pillars we talked about.
Ecology, energy, and economics.
Right. Now, you contrast that with authors like Tao Xu. He might have fewer total citations, but he's active in a wider variety of topics.
So he and other Chinese scholars show much stronger co-citation clusters.
Much stronger. They're deeply embedded in these established collaborative networks. They're kind of the engine room of traditional HEC research. High co-citation shows the power of an established research community. Steg is pushing the frontier while the Chinese clusters are driving the core. It shows two very different kinds of academic influence.
That distinction is a perfect lead-in to our next segment, the research frontier and the gaps. So to find the absolute leading edge, the analysis looked at top-tier journals like Nature. What were they elevating?
The topics most favored by those journals were, and this is very clear, behavior and intervention and energy poverty, justice, and equality.
So that just reinforces it. Psychology and equity are the definitive frontiers right now.
Absolutely. The academic world has moved beyond just asking if the technology works. Now they're asking if it works for everyone and if people are actually using it the way it was designed.
So if we were to boil this all down for you, the listener, into future directions, the consensus is pretty clear.
It is. First, efficiency and environment, they're foundational. They will remain dominant. We still need better tech.
But the focus is maturing.
Right. Second, energy poverty and electricity consumption will continue their rapid growth. This is really driven by the need to meet global goals like SDG 7 and SDG 13 climate action to make sure the green transition is equitable.
And third, the social and psychological factors. They're becoming paramount. The literature is calling for more experimental methods to really study those irrational factors that influence our energy use.
But we have to come back to the deficiencies. What's missing from this enormous, exploding field of research?
The analysis points to three critical gaps that are stopping these great ideas from becoming global realities. Number one, geographical imbalance,
A huge lack of non-Western, non-China research.
which makes it really difficult to assess global progress on the SDGs, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The research remains culturally narrow, but the targets are global.
Exactly. Number two, limited cooperation. Despite all the papers, the overall lack of strong cross-country cooperation limits diverse viewpoints. The U.S. and Chinese clusters are still operating somewhat independently.
And finally, number three, the one we touched on earlier, the missing voices. The field is just overwhelmingly academic.
That severe lack of policymakers and industry practitioners means the field is dominated by theory. And that could seriously slow down the translation of these really relevant findings into real-world action.
So to recap our deep dive here, HEC research has absolutely exploded since 2005. It's highly centralized in a few key journals and countries, with the USA and China as these twin academic powerhouses.
And the intellectual focus has shifted dramatically. It's moved from those basic economic demand models to these complex, nuanced issues of human behavior, efficiency, and energy poverty.
So what does this all really mean for you? Well, understanding these trends shows that the academic consensus is finally moving toward these more nuanced behavioral and social solutions. We're not just relying on purely technological fixes anymore.
Right. The whole conversation has evolved. It's gone from how do we build a better smart thermometer to how do we actually persuade people to use that thermometer optimally?
And the entire field really emerged because of that energy efficiency gap, right? That critical divide between optimal energy use and what we actually do.
It did. So since this whole research field is so dominated by academics, that 89% affiliation number, and the crucial voices from policy and industry are minimal, here's our final thought for you to mull over.
How can the vital knowledge being generated in these university-dominated journals bypass that institutional gap, this 89% problem? How does it actually get out there to influence large-scale real-world policy and infrastructure design?
That translation challenge, that's the next major hurdle for global energy security.